Opening in the shadows, under the cold glare of flickering fluorescent lights, Zara stood at the edge of a run-down roadside diner. A lone figure caught between the murmur of everyday banality and the echoing silence of her haunted past. The diner's tiled floor reflected a wash of pale light, while the stale scent of coffee and old grease mingled with a faint hint of rain. It was here, in this unremarkable moment, that the extraordinary began to unfurl. A story of isolation, mystery, and an inner battle that only the brave dare to confront. In the dim glow of the evening, as a few late-night patrons huddled over, half-empty cups and whispered secrets to themselves, Zara sat tucked away in a shadowed corner. Her eyes, dark and searching, flitted nervously towards the grimy windows. She clutched a lukewarm coffee, her knuckles white with tension, a silent testament to the constant war waged within her. Each sip was a struggle, a futile attempt to calm the tempest raging in her heart. It was as if the very act of drinking could somehow dull the sharp, relentless memories of a life shattered by betrayal and bloodshed. For years, she had run. Not from a place, but from a time. A memory of a night when everything she believed in crumbled into dust. That night had carved deep scars into her soul, leaving her with the bitter taste of regret and an unyielding fear of what might be lurking in the darkness. Now, as she sat alone amid the hum of artificial light and the low murmur of idle conversations, her mind was a labyrinth of fractured images, the lost laughter of a once vibrant pack, the warmth of family bonds reduced to cold ashes, and the ever-present ghostly reminder of a fate she could neither escape nor forget. Yet, beneath the fragile mask of detachment that she wore so meticulously, there beat the heart of a survivor. A wolf forced into silence. In that heart, memories of moonlit hunts and wild, unrestrained freedom stirred, whispering of a time when she was whole, unburdened by the chains of a tragic past. But those memories were both a comfort and a curse. For every tender recollection of what once was, there loomed the relentless shadow of the present, a darkness that clung to her like a second skin, a predator in waiting. As the diner's clock ticked methodically, echoing in the quiet spaces of her mind, Zara's thoughts raced with a mix of desperation and defiance. She had built walls around herself over the years, fortresses of solitude designed to keep the monstrous past at bay. But solitude, as she had learned, was a double-edged sword, one that offered protection, but also bred a paralyzing loneliness. The memory of that fateful night, where hope was extinguished and betrayal took root, was ever present. A bitter reminder that sometimes the scars that bind us run deeper than the wounds we see. Outside, the night was a vast, endless void, and every shadow seemed to conceal hidden threats, reminders of dangers that stalked the periphery of her existence. Zara's eyes, sharp and vigilant, scanned the darkness for any sign of movement. In those moments, her mind would conjure images of figures lurking just beyond the reach of the diner's weak light, echoes of a relentless pursuit that had haunted her every step. The very air seemed charged with anticipation, as if the night itself held its breath, waiting for fate to intervene. It was a night much like any other, yet beneath the ordinary, surfaced lay the promise of something extraordinary, an encounter that would shatter the brittle peace of her self-imposed exile. The diner, with its faded neon sign and creaking door, became the stage upon which destiny would soon play out its cruel, intricate design. For Zara, every moment was a delicate balancing act between the desire to remain hidden and the desperate yearning to reclaim the life she once knew. A life filled with laughter, love, and the fierce, untamed spirit of a wolf unbound. In that charged atmosphere, the diner's murmur of everyday life was merely a backdrop to the symphony of her inner turmoil. The contrast between the mundane chatter of unsuspecting strangers and the cacophony of memories and fears within her created a tension so palpable, it was almost as if time itself had slowed down. Every heartbeat echoed in her ears, a relentless reminder of both her fragility and her unyielding determination. There was a raw, unspoken promise in the air, one that hinted at redemption, but also at the impending clash of destinies that would force her to confront the darkness head-on. As Zara prepared to leave the fragile sanctuary of the diner, the night seemed to whisper secrets only she could hear. The cold air outside was both a reprieve and a challenge, a call to step out of the shadows and face the unknown. In that moment, with the neon lights receding behind her and the open road stretching out like a promise of both danger and deliverance, Zara took a trembling step forward. It was a step into the darkness, into the waiting arms of fate, and into the heart of a story that was about to change everything. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with the echoes of past betrayals and the potential for new beginnings. But in that fleeting moment of courage, as the chill of the night mingled with the warmth of her unresolved desires, Zara knew one immutable truth. She could no longer hide. The time had come to reclaim her destiny, even if it meant stepping into the shadows one last time, with nothing but hope to guide her way. The haunting passed. In the quiet moments between the relentless tick of the diner's clock and the steady hum of the outside world, Zara's mind would often wander back to the night that shattered her. It was a night painted in hues of betrayal and blood, a night when the fabric of her world was torn apart, leaving only remnants of pain and the bitter taste of heartbreak. She remembered it with a clarity that both haunted and defined her. The full moon had hung low in the sky, bathing the dense forest in an ethereal glow that seemed almost otherworldly. In those ancient woods, she had once felt at home, a wild, untamed spirit roaming freely under nature's vast canopy. Back then, the pack had been her family, her sanctuary. Every howl and every whispered secret under the silver light was a testament to their unity, their shared destiny. But that night, the bonds that once offered her solace transformed into shackles of despair. It was on that fateful evening that everything changed. Zara had been young, full of hope and unblemished dreams. The pack's fire had burned bright in her heart, and the promise of love and belonging filled her with a sense of invincibility. Then came the betrayal, a betrayal so deep and profound that it fractured her very soul. The one person who was meant to protect her, the one whose eyes had once shone with warmth and promise, had revealed a monstrous truth. In a moment of raw cruelty, he had turned against her, shattering her trust and leaving a trail of blood in his wake. The images still flickered before her eyes, the piercing glare of betrayal, the cold touch of hands that had once cradled her, gently now leaving only scars, and the distant, echoing sounds of a pack in mourning. In the midst of that chaos, Zara felt a darkness awaken inside her, a sinister force that lurked just beneath the surface of her human veneer. It was as if the very essence of that night had seeped into her veins, a curse that transformed her into something both beautiful and terrifying. This inner darkness was not merely a remnant of sorrow, it was a living, pulsing presence. It whispered in the quiet hours of the night, a constant reminder of a part of her that had been irrevocably tainted. She had been forced to leave behind the pack, to escape a life that was once vibrant and full of promise. Yet, in the process of running away, she could never fully shed the legacy of her past. The wild, untamed spirit of the wolf that had been so integral to her identity still stirred within her, a ghost of what she once was, and perhaps what she was destined to become again. In the sanctuary of her solitude, Zara often grappled with the duality of her existence. There was the woman who had learned to hide among the mundane lives of humans, blending into the backdrop of an indifferent world. And then there was the wolf, a creature of instinct and raw power, whose howls echoed the pain of lost nights and shattered dreams. This duality was both a curse and a gift. It allowed her to navigate a world that had no place for monsters, yet it constantly reminded her that she could never truly be free of her nature. Her memories were filled with flashes of a past steeped in both love and violence. The laughter of her pack, the warmth of shared moments under starlit skies, were now tainted by the stark reality of betrayal. The man who had once vowed to be her mate, her protector, had instead become the harbinger of her deepest fears. His betrayal had not only stolen her sense of belonging, but had also awakened a monstrous part of her, a relentless, unyielding force that refused to be silenced. As she sat there in the diner, lost in thought, Zara felt the weight of that night press down on her. Each heartbeat was a reminder of the tragedy that had forever altered her course. The spectral images of that dreadful evening blurred the line between memory and reality, merging into a haunting tapestry of pain and resilience. She could almost feel the chill of the forest night, the eerie luminescence of the moon, and the terror that had driven her to abandon everything she had ever known. Yet, within that maelstrom of emotions lay a strange, inexplicable longing. It was the yearning for a second chance, a desperate hope that perhaps one day she could reclaim the fragments of her shattered self and forge a new path. But that hope was tempered by the knowledge that some wounds, no matter how deeply they are hidden, never truly heal. The dark force inside her, the monstrous echo of that night, was a constant reminder that the past was never far behind. In the solitude of the diner, with its stale air and indifferent patrons, Zara's inner turmoil waged a silent battle. The demon of her past whispered cruel taunts in the recesses of her mind, urging her to succumb to the darkness. Yet, a flicker of defiance burned within her, a quiet, steadfast determination not to be defined solely by the pain of betrayal. It was a resolve born from the ashes of her former life, a promise to herself that she would rise above the darkness, no matter how monstrous it seemed. This internal conflict, this war between the remnants of a cherished past and the desperate need to escape, was the essence of Zara's being. And though she had been running for years, fleeing from the specters of that fateful night, she knew deep down that she could never truly outrun herself. The shadows of her past were indelibly etched into her soul, a constant reminder that some battles are fought not on the open road, but within the quiet chambers of one's heart. In that moment, as the night wore on and the neon lights flickered in rhythm with her heartbeat, Zara realized that her journey was far from over. The darkness inside her was not just a curse. It was also a part of the fierce, untamed power that made her who she was. And perhaps in embracing even the most monstrous parts of herself, she could find the strength to forge a future that was as wild and free as the moonlit nights of her past. The forbidden bond with Thorn. Long before Zara's heart was marred by the echo of betrayal, there existed a time when destiny seemed to weave its threads in her favor. A time when she believed that the mate bond was a divine blessing, a fated connection meant to bind two souls in everlasting unity. In those days, Thorn was more than just a name whispered among the pack. He was a promise of passion and protection, a gentle presence whose charm lit up the darkest nights. His eyes, deep and earnest, held a flicker of tenderness that spoke of a love pure and unblemished, and for a fleeting moment, Zara allowed herself to dream of a future intertwined with his. But as time wore on, the bright promise of their union began to tarnish under the weight of a cruel reality. Thorn's initial allure, his soft-spoken words and the delicate caress of his gaze, slowly gave way to a darker, more insidious force. What had once appeared as a gentle destiny soon transformed into a suffocating bond, a twisted tether that wrapped itself around her very soul. His love, once a tender caress, turned possessive and obsessive. It curdled into jealousy and cruelty that stung like icy shards against her skin. Zara's mind became a battleground for conflicting emotions. On one hand, the memory of the love she had once believed in, the promise of a soulmate who would stand by her side and shield her from harm, remained stubbornly alive. On the other, the harsh, relentless reality of Thorn's transformation haunted her every step. He was no longer the man who had once made her heart flutter with hope. Instead, he had morphed into something else entirely, a figure shrouded in menace and bitterness, whose every whispered word and every lingering glance served as a reminder of a fate she had desperately tried to escape. There were nights when, beneath the pale gaze of the moon, Zara would close her eyes and recall Thorn's early days. She remembered how his laughter had once sounded like a soft melody, and how his touch had promised warmth and belonging. Yet those memories were now bitter relics of a past that seemed both unreal and unbearably painful. For with each passing day, the forced bond that tethered them grew heavier, its invisible chains tightening around her spirit, leaving her gasping for freedom. Thorn's descent into obsession was as gradual as it was inevitable. His love, once untainted, had curdled into a possessiveness that bordered on madness. The man who had once vowed to cherish and protect her had become a relentless specter, haunting her thoughts, intruding upon her dreams, and whispering dark promises in the dead of night. His jealousy manifested in cruel gestures and harsh words, each a dagger aimed at the fragile remnants of her self-worth. With every act of cruelty, the bond that was meant to be a sign of divine destiny morphed into a prison of emotional torment. Zara's heart ached with the painful duality of it all. She yearned for the days when love felt like a liberating force, a bond that promised to elevate her beyond the ordinary, to make her feel invincible and cherished. Yet, as she struggled, beneath the crushing weight of Thorn's unyielding claim, she felt herself retreating further into isolation. The very connection that had once inspired dreams of eternal bliss now twisted into a chain that tethered her to a life of perpetual fear and sorrow. It was a bond that did not heal, but rather deepened the wounds of betrayal, leaving her to wonder if the love that once seemed fated was nothing more than an illusion, a cruel trick played by fate itself. This internal struggle became the crucible in which Zara's resolve was forged. Every time she looked into the mirror, she saw not only the tired woman with haunted eyes, but also a spark of defiance, a glimmer of hope that refused to be extinguished. Though Thorn's presence loomed large, a part of her began to question whether the bond was truly unbreakable. In the silent moments of reflection, she dared to imagine a life where the chains of that cursed connection could be shattered, where she might reclaim the freedom that had been so callously stolen from her. Yet the more she contemplated this possibility, the more the seeds of rebellion began to take root within her soul. There was an undeniable truth in the way her inner wolf stirred, a primal call for independence that had been smothered under the weight of forced affection. It whispered to her in the quiet hours, urging her to break free from the shackles of a destiny that had become her undoing. This was not a path of destruction, but one of rebirth, a chance to redefine love on her own terms, without the dark, suffocating residue of a bond that had been imposed upon her. The transformation was gradual but relentless. As each day passed, Zara's thoughts turned increasingly to the possibility of liberation. Every memory of Thorn's early charms was now intermingled with the harsh reality of his obsession, a duality that tore at her, yet also propelled her towards a future that promised renewal. It was a future where the love she once believed in could be reclaimed and reshaped, a future where she could finally embrace the wild, unbound spirit within her without fear of being consumed by it. In the silent battle between the remnants of fate and the call for freedom, Zara found herself standing at a crossroads. The forbidden bond with Thorn, with all its bittersweet memories and dark consequences, was a constant reminder of what had been lost. Yet, within that same bond lay the seeds of her greatest strength, the courage to defy destiny and reclaim her own life. With every heartbeat, the tension between love and despair, destiny and defiance, grew more profound, setting the stage for a rebellion that would challenge the very nature of fate itself. The life of a fugitive, as night deepened around her, Zara slipped away from the fleeting refuge of the diner, every step echoing with the weight of her past. The cold, unyielding darkness embraced her like a shroud, and the city's distant hum faded into a silent, oppressive solitude. With a steady, determined pace, she moved along empty sidewalks and down narrow alleys, each step a quiet rebellion against the memories that haunted her. The chill in the air was piercing, a reminder that the night was as unforgiving as the life she'd left behind. Zara's hand still gripped the worn mug from the diner, its surface cold against her skin, as if echoing the numbness she often felt. The mug was a small, inconsequential token of a world where she had once sought solace, now repurposed as a talisman in her desperate flight. Every time her fingers tightened around it, the rough ceramic reminded her of the fragility of her existence, of how easily her past could catch up with her if she let her guard fall for even a moment. Her heart pounded relentlessly, a staccato rhythm that mingled with the distant sound of dripping water and the whisper of wind around dilapidated buildings. It was as if her very pulse was a metronome, marking the moments of fear and determination in her journey. Beneath the veneer of calm that she struggled to maintain, her inner wolf stirred, a restless force, yearning to break free, yet equally burdened by the sorrow of unhealed wounds. Every beat was a reminder of what she had lost and what she was, constantly running from. With each cautious glance over her shoulder, the relentless dread of being pursued gripped her mind. Shadows played tricks on her eyes. Every unexpected flicker of movement sparked a surge of adrenaline. She imagined unseen eyes tracking her through the darkened streets, the lingering presence of her past following closely behind. The thought of being discovered, of that monstrous shadow materializing out of the gloom, was a specter that taunted her every step. Yet she pushed on, driven by the singular desire to reclaim her freedom, no matter how elusive it might be. The journey was both a physical escape and a visceral reminder of the isolation that had defined her life for so long. In the solitude of the night, Zara felt the crushing weight of her memories intensify. The very streets she traversed were lined with ghosts of her past. The sound of a distant howl, the fleeting glimpse of a figure in the periphery of her vision, each detail interwoven with the bitter taste of betrayal and loss. The urban landscape, with its cold concrete and flickering streetlights, was transformed into a labyrinth of both danger and possibility, a stage where her inner turmoil played, out against the backdrop of a city that never truly slept. Every so often, she paused beneath a dim street lamp, its feeble glow barely cutting through the darkness. In those moments, she could almost hear the murmur of old voices, a collage of laughter from days when her pack had been her family, mixed with the anguished whispers of a night that had forever changed her. The solitude felt both like a refuge and a prison. It offered her the anonymity she needed to vanish from the world that hunted her, yet it also left her raw and exposed to the memories that refused to fade. Zara's footsteps were measured and deliberate, her body attuned to the slightest shift in the environment. Every sound, the distant rumble of a passing car, the rustle of leaves in the cool breeze, set her nerves on edge. Her senses were heightened, every detail etched into her mind like a warning sign. The night was alive with secrets, and she, a fugitive from her own past, was the unwilling keeper of them all. Her internal conflict waged silently, as the part of her that was once wild and free fought against the chains of fear and regret that had been forged by years of running. Times, as she moved deeper into the darkened maze of the city, a part of her longed for the warmth of human connection, the echo of a laugh shared under starlight, or even the simple comfort of being seen without judgment. But that hope was always tempered by the harsh reality of her existence, a reality in which every step forward was haunted by the possibility of capture, of her past closing in with the inevitability of nightfall. The duality of her nature was laid bare in these moments, the fierce, untamed spirit of the wolf, intermingling with the tender vulnerability of a wounded soul. As Zara continued her solitary trek through the cold night, every heartbeat, every cautious glance, reinforced her, determination to outpace the memories that threatened to engulf her. The life of a fugitive was not merely about survival. It was a constant battle against the encroaching darkness, both around her and within her. In that relentless pursuit of freedom, she clung to the belief that beyond the shadows of this night lay the promise of a new dawn, a chance to finally lay her past, to rest, and step into a future defined not by fear, but by hope. A fateful scent. The rhythm of Zara's solitary escape was suddenly shattered by an unexpected whisper on the wind. A scent so primal and potent that it seemed to suspend time itself. One moment she was navigating the cold, unyielding darkness of the city, her senses finely tuned to every distant murmur and creak of the night. The next, an invisible force caught her breath and made her stop dead in her tracks. It began as a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Amid the usual urban odors of damp concrete and exhaust fumes, there emerged an undercurrent that was unmistakably wild. It was the heady, almost intoxicating aroma of a creature in full, untamed bloom, a powerful wolf-like scent that enveloped the air with a magnetic intensity. Zara's heart, which had been pounding in a steady, anxious rhythm, suddenly leaped, as this mysterious fragrance ignited something deep within her. For an instant, the world around her seemed to blur into a canvas of shadow and light. The feeble glow of a nearby street lamp danced on the slick pavement. But it was no longer the mundane cityscape that dominated her attention. Instead, every detail, the chill in the air, the rustling of leaves, even the faint echo of distant footsteps, transformed into vivid, pulsating signals. It was as though the night had spoken to her in a language only her wild soul could understand. Zara felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins, a raw, almost electric jolt that sent shivers down her spine. Her inner wolf, long held, at bay by fear and isolation, stirred awake with a ferocity that was both thrilling and terrifying. It was as if every muscle in her body was suddenly alive with purpose, her instincts sharpening into a blade that sliced through the haze of her, past and present. The scent, deep and complex, carried hints of earth and moss, wild herbs, and something unmistakably animal, a primal aroma that awakened the dormant parts of her being. In that charged moment, she stood frozen, caught between the necessity of escape and the irresistible pull of destiny. The scent was not just a mere fragrance. It was an omen, a harbinger of change. Its arrival was both gentle and insistent, beckoning her to turn away from the familiar terror of her constant flight and to face something entirely unexpected. The very air seemed to vibrate with possibility, a promise that this was the turning point she had been both dreading and yearning for. Her mind raced with conflicting emotions. The rational part of her, the woman who had spent years dodging the shadows of her past, warned her to flee, to continue disappearing into the night as she always had. Yet, the wild, untamed spirit within her rebelled against that notion, whispering that sometimes the path to freedom lay not in constant running, but in facing the forces that haunted you. That intoxicating scent was a call to arms, a silent command that urged her to confront the destiny she had long evaded. The unexpected rush of adrenaline coursing through her was accompanied by a deep, resonating thrum from within, as if the very heartbeat of the forest had merged with her own. In that moment, she felt both exposed and invincible, a paradox that echoed the complex duality of her existence. Her eyes, wide with a mix of trepidation and fierce anticipation, scanned the darkness around her, searching for the source of that unmistakable aroma. Yet despite her heightened senses, the source remained elusive, hidden like a secret waiting to be unveiled. Every nerve in her body screamed with heightened awareness, each sensation amplified to an almost unbearable clarity. The rustling of a stray paper, the distant clamor of a passing car, even the whisper of her own breath. Each sound was magnified as if orchestrated by fate itself. It was a sensory overload that both disoriented and empowered her, drawing her, closer to a destiny she could neither predict nor control. The scent seemed to weave a tapestry of memories and possibilities, stirring fragments of a past she had desperately tried to forget. The lost nights under the wild, untamed sky, the visceral freedom of a life once lived in harmony with nature, and yet there was also an undercurrent of warning, a subtle hint that this moment, as breathtaking as it was, could lead to both salvation and danger. It was a turning point laden with promise, yet shrouded in mystery, a delicate balance between the hope of renewal and the risk of unleashing the very darkness she had fought so long to contain. As the aroma lingered in the cold night air, Zara felt a deep, unspoken invitation, a call to step beyond the boundaries of her relentless flight. For the first time in years, she considered the possibility of not just running away, but of confronting the spectral forces that had long tormented her. The promise of an unforeseen turning point glimmered at the edges of her consciousness, urging her to heed the call of destiny, even if it meant facing the unknown. In that silent, charged moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The scent, with all its primal power and mystique, was a harbinger of change, a catalyst that would force her to decide whether to remain a fugitive in the shadows or to embrace the wild, untamed future that awaited her. And as the night deepened, so too did the stirring within her, an awakening that hinted at the beginning of something extraordinary, a transformation that could redefine her very essence without yet revealing all its secrets. The encounter with the Alpha. Just as Zara's senses were still reeling from the overwhelming scent that had halted her in mid-stride, the night shifted its course. Out of the darkness emerged a presence so formidable it seemed to command the very air around her. There, under the feeble glow of a solitary street lamp, stood Aldri, the Alpha King. His figure cut a striking silhouette against the ink-black backdrop, exuding a magnetic authority that was impossible to ignore. Aldri moved with a measured grace that belied his imposing stature. Every step was deliberate, resonating with the strength and confidence of a leader born to rule. His dark, intense eyes met Zara's with a gaze that seemed to peel away the layers of her carefully constructed isolation. In that moment, she felt an inexplicable pull, as if her very soul recognized him, a kindred spirit whose presence stirred a forgotten part of her wild, untamed nature. For a heartbeat, time appeared to pause. Zara's heart, already pounding from the adrenaline of the Fateful Scent, now accelerated further, its rhythm echoing the unspoken call of destiny. Shock and wonder battled within her, for never had she imagined that in the midst of her frantic flight, she would encounter someone as commanding and enigmatic as Aldri. He radiated an aura of both danger and gentle command, a duality that was as mesmerizing as it was disconcerting. Aldri's features were chiseled with a sculptor's precision. His jaw was strong and unwavering, his brow furrowed in quiet determination. There was an inherent kindness in his eyes, a softness that contrasted with the fierce intensity of his presence. It was as though he carried the weight of his responsibilities with both the hardness of iron and the tenderness of a guardian. In the subtle curve of his smile and the steady cadence of his voice, Zara sensed not only the might of an alpha, but also the promise of protection, a shield against the darkness that had so long haunted her. Without a word, Aldri stepped closer, his presence filling the space between them with an undeniable power. His hand, calloused yet gentle, extended as if to offer both reassurance and invitation. For a moment, Zara hesitated, torn between the instinct to flee and the compelling magnetism of this new force in her life. The danger that had always lurked in the shadows of her existence now paled in comparison to the possibility that Aldri represented. A destiny where strength and tenderness could coexist, where the chaos of her past might finally be tamed. In the silent exchange that followed, Zara's inner wolf stirred with recognition. There was something profoundly familiar in Aldri's gaze, a kind of unspoken understanding that spoke of battles fought, scars earned, and a life defined by both power and vulnerability. It was as if he, too, had wandered through the depths of darkness, only to emerge with a resolve as fierce as the one that now shone in his eyes. This was no ordinary encounter. This was a meeting of two souls, each bearing the weight of their own histories, yet drawn together by an undeniable force of fate. The contrast between Aldri's gentle command and the perpetual danger that Zara had known was stark. While her life had been a constant run from unseen terrors and the remnants of a cursed past, here stood a man whose mere presence seemed to promise a reprieve. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and resonant, carrying both an assurance and a challenge. "You don't belong to the shadows," he said, his tone neither harsh nor soft, but resolute, a declaration that cut through the night like a beacon of hope. His words, simple yet powerful, resonated with Zara's deepest longings. In that instant, she knew that her fate was inextricably linked with his. There was a cinematic quality to their meeting, as if the universe had conspired to bring them together at this critical juncture. The cool night air, the subtle interplay of light and darkness, and the hushed sounds of the city all seemed to conspire in favor of this fateful encounter. The natural world around them, the whisper of the wind, the distant call of nocturnal creatures, played a quiet symphony, underscoring the gravity of this moment. It was a convergence of destiny and desire, where every sensory detail contributed to an overwhelming sense of possibility. As Zara stood there, caught between her ingrained need to hide and the sudden, potent allure of a future she had never dared to imagine, she felt a subtle shift within herself. The relentless fear that had governed her every step began to give way to a cautious curiosity, a desire to see where this unexpected path might lead. Aldri's presence was a promise of a new beginning, a chance to step out of the perpetual twilight of her existence and into a life where light and shadow danced in harmonious balance. In that suspended moment, beneath the silent watch of the stars, Zara's world tilted on its axis. The haunting echoes of her past, the bitter memories of betrayal and forced bonds, seemed to recede into the background, overshadowed by the undeniable pull of Aldri's magnetic presence. With each beat of her heart, she recognized that this encounter was more than mere chance. It was a turning point, a pivotal moment where the course of her life was poised to change forever. And so, as the night enveloped them in its timeless embrace, Zara took a tentative step forward. The air, charged with anticipation and possibility, held the promise of a future where the darkness might finally yield to the light. In the presence of the Alpha King, in the convergence of his powerful yet compassionate gaze, and her own flickering hope, a new chapter began to write itself, a chapter where destiny and desire merged into a single, undeniable force. The tension of two worlds. Under the cover of night, the space between Zara and Aldri crackled with an unspoken intensity, a palpable tension that seemed to suspend time itself. As Zara prepared to turn away, seeking the solace of anonymity, in the dark, Aldri's firm presence stepped into her path, halting her escape with a quiet, resolute authority. His deep, steady voice broke the silence, soft yet unyielding. "You cannot run from what you are." The words, simple and unadorned, struck Zara like a jolt of electricity. For a moment she was caught off guard, her breath hitching as the familiar instinct to flee warred with a budding, unfamiliar spark of hope. Aldri's tone carried both a warning and an invitation, a challenge to confront the demons that had hounded her for so long. His gaze, unwavering and penetrating, seemed to read every hidden fear and secret desire buried deep within her. On that charged moment, the dichotomy of their worlds became startlingly clear. Her life, a desperate flight from a dark past, clashed with his realm, a world ruled by strength, protection, and a sense of belonging that Zara had long yearned for. "Why? Do you hide?" Aldri pressed gently, yet there was an edge to his voice that brooked no deflection. The night may be long, but it is not endless. You deserve to step into the light." Zara's eyes, still glistening with residual fear, flickered with uncertainty. Every instinct told her to escape, to slip silently back into the safety of shadows where she had spent so many lonely nights. Yet, as she met Aldri's gaze, a surge of conflicting emotions surged through her. Fear mingled with relief, sorrow, entangled with a timid glimmer of trust. She had spent years running, learning to live in the margins of society, but here, with him, the possibility of something different stirred within her. For a long, suspended moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the soft rustle of the wind and the distant hum of city life, as if the world itself held its breath in anticipation. Zara's heart pounded against her ribcage, each beat resonating with the weight of her past and the uncertainty of her future. Aldri's presence was like a beacon, intense and steady, drawing her in even as the scars of her solitary flight whispered caution. "You've been hiding for too long," Aldri continued, his voice a blend of empathy and resolve. "I understand the terror of your memories, the relentless pursuit of your past. But what if there is another way? A way where you are not defined by what you've run from, but by what you can become." His words, spoken softly in the quiet, darkness, evoked a visceral reaction within Zara. The idea of transformation, of moving from perpetual flight to a life where trust might take root, was as intoxicating as it was terrifying. She recalled the years of isolation, the nights filled with cold fear and endless regret, the pain of betrayal, the oppressive weight of a forced bond, had rendered her a ghost in her own life. And yet, here was Aldri, offering not only refuge, but the promise of renewal, a chance to reclaim the self she had long thought lost. "Who are you to say such things?" Zara managed to ask, her voice trembling on the edge of defiance and longing. "After everything, how can I trust that this isn't just another illusion, a lure into a trap I can't escape?" Aldri's eyes softened, and he took a measured step closer, careful not to intrude upon her personal space, yet ensuring she felt the gravity of his presence. "I am no stranger to darkness, Zara," he replied, his tone imbued with a quiet intensity. "I have seen the shadows that cling to broken souls and the light that can still burn within them. I do not offer empty promises. I offer the possibility of liberation, a chance to find your strength and let go of the chains that have bound you for far too long." The sincerity in his words, combined with the magnetic force of his very being, stirred something deep inside her, a flicker of a hope that dared to challenge the fear. In the interplay of their voices, the tension of two vastly different worlds began to give way to a delicate yet powerful connection. Her instincts, honed by years of evasion, warred with the emerging desire to believe that perhaps she was not as irreparably damaged as she feared. In that moment, the night seemed to transform around them. The darkness, which had once been an enemy to be escaped, took on a different quality, a quiet canvas upon which the possibility of a new beginning could be painted. Aldri's presence was not merely imposing, it was reassuring. He radiated an energy that spoke of battles fought and won, of the burdens of leadership carried with both grace and unyielding strength. His gentle command was not a threat, but a protective embrace, a silent vow to guard her from the terrors that had long shadowed her every step. As the wind whispered through the empty streets, Zara felt an internal shift. The relentless urge to run, to hide from the relentless pursuit of her haunted past, began to waver. Instead, a fragile yet undeniable part of her longed to step forward, to dare to accept the possibility of trust, however tentative it might be. In the quiet cadence of Aldri's voice, in the depth of his gaze, she sensed the stirring of a new bond, a bond born not of force or destiny imposed, but of mutual recognition and shared resilience. And so, standing in the cool, solitary night, With the distant city as their silent witness, Zara and Aldri found themselves at a crossroads. The tension between their worlds, her legacy of pain and his promise of protection, hung heavy in the air. Yet, within that tension lay the seeds of transformation. It was the moment when the solitary flight of a wounded soul might finally yield to the slow, tentative embrace of trust, and the promise of a future where darkness and light danced together in a fragile, yet resilient harmony. Inner turmoil and fleeting memories. In the quiet solitude of the night, as Zara found a brief moment of pause amid her relentless flight, her thoughts began to swirl into a storm of inner turmoil. Each step forward seemed to unlock fragments of a past she had long tried to bury, a past where joy, pain, and fierce loyalty intermingled beneath the silver glow of the moon. In those moments of uneasy stillness, memories surged like tidal waves, threatening to overwhelm her fragile resolve. A flash of happier times pierced through the darkness of her recollections, a vivid memory of her youth, when the pack was her. Family and the world brimmed with the raw promise of freedom. She could see it all so clearly, the laughter echoing through the dense forest, the warmth of shared meals under starlit skies, and the unspoken bond that made every howl a hymn of unity. In those days, she had been unburdened by the weight of betrayal, her spirit untainted by the bitter taste of forced destiny. The wild, untamed nights had been filled with an intoxicating blend of exhilaration and belonging, where every heartbeat resonated with the fierce pulse of nature itself. Yet, even as these cherished memories glimmered with nostalgic beauty, they clashed violently with the dark, suffocating reality that had replaced them. The forced bond with Thorn, a bond marred by obsession, jealousy, and cruelty, had twisted the promise of love into a chain that constricted her every breath. It was a constant reminder of what she had lost, and the part of herself that had been violently stolen. That sinister connection, once shrouded in the illusion of fate, now lay bare as a malignant curse, gnawing at her soul with each passing day. Torn between the tender echoes of a once vibrant life and the harrowing scars of a forced union, Zara felt a duality stirring within her. There was the vulnerable, broken woman who longed for the innocence of days gone by, a time when every moment was imbued with a pure, unfiltered joy. And there was the fierce wolf, restless and untamed, whose very essence defied the chains of captivity and whispered of a wild future yet to be claimed. This internal conflict was not merely a battle of memory versus reality. It was the collision of two natures that had defined her existence. Each heartbeat echoed with the rhythm of a dual heritage, one that was both human in its fragility and wolf in its indomitable spirit. As she walked through the deserted streets, the cool night air, carrying echoes of distant howls, Zara's thoughts oscillated between what once was and what might be. Her mind wandered back to the nights spent beneath a canopy of stars, where every shared laugh and every proud howl wove an intricate tapestry of hope and belonging. Those moments were fleeting, delicate wisps of a time when the world had seemed infinitely full of promise. And yet, just as quickly, the painful specter of Thorn's presence would intrude, a reminder that some memories were inextricably linked to the chains of a past she had fought so desperately to escape. The suspense of that unresolved threat lingered in every shadow, a constant silent menace that urged her to keep moving, to never allow herself the luxury of forgetting. Even as the allure of Aldri's steady, protective gaze ignited a spark of cautious trust within her, a part of Zara remained vigilant. The feeling was bittersweet, a mingling of hope and fear that told her that the night, with all its promises of renewal, was still haunted by the lingering echoes of betrayal. The unresolved specter of Thorn was like an ever-present ghost in her peripheral vision, a dark reminder that the past was never truly behind her. In the depths of her internal monologue, Zara questioned whether the soft, melodic memories of her, former pack life could ever coexist with the harsh reality of her forced bond. Was it possible to reclaim the radiant joy of those bygone days without being forever shackled by the sinister remnants of what had been imposed upon her? The thought was both a source of yearning and a wellspring of anguish. A cruel irony that, just when she began to dare to dream of a future unburdened by past cruelty, the darkness of that fate crept in once more. Every footstep on the cracked pavement echoed the duality of her existence, the gentle reminder of a once warm past and the sharp sting of a present mired in loss. The night was heavy with unspoken questions, with memories that danced just at the edge of her consciousness, threatening to pull her back into the depths of despair. Yet, in that same darkness, there was a spark. A promise that perhaps the bonds of her past could be rewritten, that the inner wolf within her could one day break free from its cursed tether. As the chill of the night seeped into her bones, Zara clutched her jacket tighter around her, a futile shield against the intangible ghosts of her past. In that isolated moment, amidst the silent duel of memory and fear, she resolved that she would not allow the darkness to claim her entirely. Instead, she would embrace the duality of her nature, the tender human vulnerability intertwined with the fierce, unyielding spirit of the wolf. And though the thread of Thorn's lingering curse was a constant, oppressive presence, the promise of a future where she could finally be free beckoned her onward, a fragile hope waiting to be nurtured. In the light of a new dawn, escaping the past, with each stride along the desolate, rain-slicked streets, Zara pushed herself further away from the shackles of a life defined by relentless fear. Every footfall echoed like a defiant drumbeat against the darkness that had clung to her for so long. Yet no matter how far she ran, the ghost of Thorn loomed at the edge of her vision, a silent, ever-present reminder of the pain that had once enslaved her soul. The night air, cold and unyielding, bit at her skin as she navigated the labyrinth of empty alleyways and deserted sidewalks. The persistent patter of raindrops on the pavement mingled with the thumping of her heart, creating a cacophony of sound that underscored the urgency of her flight. She was determined, every fiber of her being resolute in the desperate need to escape the past. Yet, with each turn, the memories came flooding back, the relentless, haunting specter of Thorn's presence that stalked her in the silent hours. Her mind, a turbulent battleground of hope and despair, replayed scenes of terror as vividly as if they were happening anew. In the dim glow of streetlights, the shadows morphed into phantom shapes, and the echo of Thorn's malicious laughter whispered through the cold air. These were not mere recollections. They were chains that threatened to pull her back into a nightmare, from which she had long tried to awaken. As Zara quickened her pace, her senses were on high alert. Every rustle of wind, every distant honk, made her flinch as if danger were poised to leap from the darkness at any moment. She recalled the chilling moment when Thorn's cruelty had first shattered her world, leaving an indelible mark on her heart. The memory was vivid, raw, unfiltered, and it served as a constant, painful reminder of why she must continue running. Yet amidst the fear and the pain, there flickered a tentative spark of defiance. Each step forward was not merely an escape from the past. It was an assertion of her own strength, a declaration that she would no longer be defined by the terrors that had once held her captive. But as the hours stretched on, the exhaustion of constant flight began to seep into her bones. The endless cycle of running had drained her physically and emotionally, leaving her teetering on the edge of despair. In the solitude of the rain-soaked night, she paused beneath a flickering neon sign, its feeble light barely piercing the gloom. In that rare moment of stillness, Zara's eyes filled with tears, a mix of frustration, sorrow, and the deep, burning desire for something different. She realized that despite her desperate attempts to flee, Thorn's shadow remained an inescapable part of her. It was as if the very air around her was saturated with memories of betrayal and hurt, an omnipresent force that no amount of running could dispel. A slow, painful truth began to dawn on her. The more she ran, the more she was chasing an illusion of safety that could never truly exist. The relentless pursuit had become a self-imposed exile, a life spent in the perpetual twilight of fear and uncertainty. As the adrenaline began to wane, a heavy weariness settled in, both in her limbs and her spirit. In that fragile moment of vulnerability, she allowed herself to acknowledge a daunting possibility. Perhaps running was no longer the answer. The past, with all its haunting regrets and bitter chains, was a part of her. Inescapable, undeniable, yet also a source of strength if she could learn to harness it. This realization, both terrifying and liberating, marked a turning point in her internal struggle. The notion that fleeing might never bring true freedom was like a shard of ice breaking through the fog of her mind. With trembling resolve, Zara wiped away her tears and stood up a little straighter, the chill of the night somehow sharpening her determination. In that quiet, rain-drenched interlude, she resolved that she would no longer let fear dictate her every move. Instead, she would confront the specters of her past, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. Her eyes, once clouded with despair, now burned with a flicker of defiant hope, a subtle, yet unmistakable spark that promised change. The realization that running might be a futile endeavor did not shatter her spirit. Rather, it ignited a newfound resolve to seek a path forward that embraced her true self. Zara recognized that true freedom might not lie in the endless chase, but in the courage to face the memories that had long haunted her. With a deep, steadying breath, she took another step forward, each stride now imbued with the conviction that she was ready to transform her pain into power. The night, with all its foreboding shadows and unspoken threats, began to feel less like an endless prison and more like the threshold of a new beginning. The storm around her was not merely a tempest of nature, but a mirror reflecting the tumult within, a relentless force that, once faced, could give way to the possibility of healing. Zara's journey was far from over, but for the first time, she embraced the truth that she needed to stop running. In the silent, cold darkness, amid the echoes of a tormented past, she chose to take control of her destiny, even if the road ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. A dangerous pursuit. The calm that had begun to settle over Zara's newfound determination was abruptly shattered by a sound, a low, insistent vibration that cut through the silence of the night. Her phone, long dormant in her pocket, buzzed, with an urgency that sent a jolt of terror racing through her veins. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out, only to see Thorn's name illuminated on the screen. In that split second, every fragile hope she had so painstakingly nurtured began to crumble under the weight of his menacing presence. The message was brief, its words sharp and laced with a venom that echoed the cruelty of a past. She desperately tried to escape. "You're running out of places to hide. I'm coming." There was no warmth in his tone, only the cold promise of retribution. Zara's heart pounded in her chest, a cacophony of fear and adrenaline that drowned out all rational thought. The words reverberated in her mind, each syllable, a reminder of the relentless pressure Thorn had exerted over her life. His influence was no longer a distant threat. It was here, piercing the thin veil of her supposed escape. Every shadow seemed to twist into a sinister shape as she hurriedly scanned the darkness. The familiar sounds of the city, distant sirens, the hum of traffic, now became accomplices to her growing terror. It was as if the night itself had become a labyrinth of danger, every dark corner potentially harboring the ghost of Thorn's wrath. The sensation was overwhelming, a constant oppressive force that gnawed at her psyche. With every step, she felt the weight of his pursuit bearing down on her, as though Thorn's very presence was seeping into the air, closing in like a predator stalking its prey. In that harrowing moment, Zara's mind raced with fragments of memories, the cold, calculated cruelty of Thorn, the way his eyes had once burned with possessive obsession, and the devastating impact his betrayal had left on her soul. These memories, once distant and painful, now surged to the forefront, mingling with the terror of his imminent return. the familiar ache of dread intertwined with the adrenaline of flight. And for a heartbeat, she felt as if her very identity was being torn apart. As she navigated the narrow, dimly lit streets, every instinct screamed for her to hide, to vanish into the anonymity of the urban maze. Yet, the pressure of Thorn's communication left no room for solace. The constant threat, like an invisible chain, tightened around her, forcing her into a relentless chase. A chase where the destination was unknown, and every step was fraught with peril. The tension was palpable, a living thing that wrapped around her heart, making each breath a labor, each heartbeat a painful reminder of the man who haunted her. Her thoughts became a battleground where survival clashed with despair. How long could she continue this endless flight? The question echoed in her mind, unanswered and filled with dread. The terror was not just of physical harm, but of a deeper, more insidious menace, a psychological weight that threatened to crush the fragile hope she had begun to foster. The more she tried to outrun him, the more it seemed that Thorn's shadow grew, as if he was an inevitable part of her fate, an inescapable specter that would forever lurk at the edges of her vision. In the distance, the sound of approaching footsteps, heavy and deliberate, brought a new surge of panic. Zara's pulse raced as she clutched her phone tightly, the screen's harsh glow a stark reminder of the communication that had shattered her momentary peace. Each step felt like a countdown to an inevitable confrontation, the air thick with tension and the promise of danger. The cityscape around her blurred into a maelstrom of dark shapes and foreboding sounds, amplifying the stakes of her every move. With the relentless hum of her pursuer in the background, Zara realized that her life had become a delicate balance between survival and the desperate yearning for new beginnings. The constant chase had become a part of her existence, a brutal dance with a force that sought to reclaim what it believed was rightfully its own. And yet, as she pressed forward, even as her limbs grew heavy with exhaustion, a flicker of defiance stirred within her. This was not the life she wanted to lead, no matter how terrifying the threat. The thought of being perpetually haunted by Thorn's influence filled her with a resolve that began to outpace her fear. In that perilous moment, as the echoes of his threat mingled with the pounding of her heart, Zara knew that the time for hiding was drawing to a close. The relentless pursuit had taught her that true freedom could not be found in the endless act of running. It could only be achieved by facing the darkness head-on. The realization was as stark as it was bitter. If she continued to flee, she would never be free. The danger was too constant, too consuming. As the night pressed in around her, Zara steeled herself for the inevitable confrontation that loomed on the horizon. Each nerve in her body hummed with the raw energy of survival, and though the terror was palpable, so too was the spark of defiance. The time had come to decide whether to let Thorn's menace dictate her fate or to confront it, to reclaim the life that had been stolen from her. In that suspended moment, between the heartbeat of fear and the surge of hope, Zara's resolve crystallized. The chase was far from over, but she was no longer willing to be a perpetual fugitive. The confrontation, however daunting, promised the possibility of liberation, a chance to break the cycle of fear and step into a future defined by her own strength. The catalyst for change. In the midst of the relentless pursuit that had long defined her existence, the night seemed to hold its breath as fate took a decisive turn. Zara's pulse raced as she darted down a narrow, rain-soaked street, each step a desperate plea for escape. The oppressive pressure of Thorn's looming threat had reached a fever pitch, and her heart pounded not only with fear, but with the unbearable weight of isolation. Just when the darkness seemed poised to swallow her whole, a presence emerged from the shadows, a figure that cut through the gloom like a beacon of hope. Aldri, the Alpha King, stepped forward with a calm, commanding grace that was impossible to ignore. His arrival was nothing short of cinematic. The ambient glow of the street lamp illuminated his chiseled features and the steely determination in his eyes. In that moment, He positioned himself squarely between Zara and the encroaching terror. His broad shoulders and unwavering stance, a protective barrier against the threat that had haunted her for so long. "Stay behind me," Aldri commanded softly, his voice a blend of authority and genuine care. There was an intimacy in his tone, a promise that he would not let the darkness claim her. Without hesitation, he reached out and gently took her trembling hand, the contact sending a shiver of reassurance through her weary body. His touch was firm, yet tender, like the steady embrace of a guardian who had known both the sting of loss and the fierce joy of redemption. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The distant sounds of the city faded away, leaving only the rhythmic beating of their hearts and the soft patter of rain as their soundtrack. In Aldri's eyes, Zara found not only the raw power of an alpha, but also the warmth of a kindred spirit. A man who understood the deep scars left by a past filled with betrayal and relentless pursuit. His gaze, steady and unyielding, communicated a silent vow. She was no longer alone, and he would shoulder the burden of her fear. Zara's defiance wavered as she allowed herself to absorb his presence. The years of solitary flight, the endless nights spent hiding from the ghost of Thorn's cruelty, all seemed to melt away in the wake of this unexpected act of protection. Yet, beneath that relief, simmered a vulnerability that she had long kept, buried, a fragility born of isolation and the constant need to fend for herself. As Aldri's hand squeezed hers in a gesture that was both intimate and heroic, she felt the stirring of hope, a spark that hinted at the possibility of a new alliance, one that could reshape her future. "I won't let him hurt you," Aldri murmured, his words echoing softly in the quiet space between them. "Not while I'm here." There was a depth to his assurance that resonated deep within her, a promise that the relentless chase, the terror that had defined her every step, might finally be brought to an end. His voice was like a balm, soothing the raw edges of her fear and lighting a path toward a future that seemed, for the first time, within reach. In that pivotal moment, Zara's inner world began to shift. The defiant, solitary wolf who had spent so many years running and hiding started to thaw in the warmth of Aldri's protective embrace. Her eyes, once clouded with the pain of relentless pursuit, now shone with a mix of cautious trust and hesitant longing. It was as if she were standing on the precipice of a new life, a life where the terror of her past might be conquered, replaced by the possibility of genuine connection and shared strength. The danger that had hounded her was still very real, and in the distance, the echo of Thorn's threat continued to reverberate through the night. But with Aldri by her side, Zara felt a surge of defiant courage. The relentless pursuit no longer seemed like an insurmountable force. Instead, it was a challenge to be met with a united front. His unwavering gaze and steady hand spoke volumes. This was not merely an act of heroism, but the beginning of a partnership forged in the crucible of shared hardship and the promise of redemption. As the rain continued to fall, washing away the remnants of her past, Zara allowed herself to lean into Aldri's strength. The shift from isolation to alliance was marked by the subtle intertwining of their hands, a silent covenant that transcended words. In the space between fear and hope, the walls she had built around her heart began to crumble. With each passing moment, she found it harder to imagine a future defined solely by the shadows of her past. Instead, she began to see the glimmer of a new dawn, one in which her true self, a blend of fierce resilience and tender vulnerability, could finally emerge. Aldri's presence, a harmonious blend of protective might and gentle reassurance, ignited within Zara a realization that perhaps she did not have to continue running forever. The night, once a canvas of despair and relentless pursuit, now held the promise of transformation. With the Alpha King by her side, she sensed the beginnings of a bond not born of fate or forced destiny, but of choice. A choice to face the darkness together and embrace the possibility of a brighter, shared future. In that quiet, rain-drenched moment, as they stood together under the dim glow of a street lamp, the inevitable confrontation with Thorn still loomed on the horizon. Yet, for the first time, Zara no longer felt like a solitary fugitive cowering in the shadows. Instead, she found herself drawn into a new reality, a reality where the power of a protective embrace could challenge even the deepest scars of the past. And in that reality, the catalyst for change was not fear, but the promise of an alliance that would redefine her destiny, the Ritual of Severance. Under the heavy veil of a starless night, the world around Zara and Aldri shifted into a realm that belonged to ancient magic and whispered secrets. Their hearts, still pounding with the intensity of their recent trials, now beat in cautious unison as they found themselves in a secluded clearing. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the faint aroma of herbs, a natural incense that hinted at rituals older than memory itself. At the center of the clearing, beneath the skeletal arms of ancient trees, a circle of smooth stones had been arranged meticulously, their surfaces worn by time and ritual. The stones seemed to pulse with a subtle, otherworldly energy, and the soft rustling of leaves created a quiet symphony that resonated with the heartbeat of the earth. Here, Aldri and Zara were not merely fugitives or survivors. They were about to stand at the threshold of a transformation, a moment when the dark chains of a forced bond could, perhaps, be shattered. It was at this charged moment that a figure emerged from the shadows, a secondary guide, known as Van. Clad in a flowing robe that blended seamlessly with the nocturnal landscape, Van carried with him the aura of ancient wisdom. His eyes, reflective and calm, held the weight of countless rituals, and his presence exuded a quiet authority that both reassured and commanded respect. He nodded solemnly to Aldri before turning his attention to Zara, his gaze soft yet penetrating, as if he could see the raw, turbulent emotions swirling within her. "Tonight, we perform the Ritual of Severance," Van intoned in a measured, almost hypnotic cadence. His voice, low and resonant, seemed to vibrate with the echoes of a time long past. "It is a dangerous path, one fraught with risk. But if you are willing, it may grant you the freedom you so desperately seek." Aldri's hand remained gently clasped around Zara's, a silent vow of protection and support. Though her heart trembled at the prospect of facing both the supernatural and the deeply personal, she also sensed that this ritual was her last chance to reclaim the essence of who she truly was. With a hesitant nod, she stepped toward the center of the stone circle, her eyes meeting Van's with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. Van led them to a low altar crafted from gnarled wood, its surface etched with symbols that pulsed with a dim, mysterious light. He produced from his satchel an assortment of small vials filled with iridescent liquids, bundles of dried herbs, and several crystals that shimmered with an inner fire. With careful, deliberate movements, he arranged these items on the altar, as if performing a sacred choreography that had been passed down through generations. "Focus on your heartbeat," Van instructed softly, his eyes never leaving Zara's. "Picture the bond that holds you captive as a tangible cord, thick, dark, and pulsing with your fear and pain. Acknowledge it, and then let your emotions flow into something new. Redirect that raw energy into the light of your true self." The air grew charged with anticipation as Van began to recite incantations in a language as old as the forest itself. His words, rhythmic and haunting, intertwined with the rustling wind and the distant call of a night bird. As he chanted, Aldri placed his free hand over Zara's heart, a steady, grounding presence amid the swirling emotions. The connection between them deepened, a silent communion of trust and shared resolve. Zara closed her eyes, and for a few heartbeats, the world faded into a tapestry of colors and sensations. The scent of herbs and the cool touch of the night air mingled with the rhythmic pulse of her blood. In her mind's eye, she saw the dark cord, the forced bond with Thorn, coiling around her heart, constricting and suffocating. It pulsed with the raw energy of fear, pain, and betrayal. Yet, as Van's incantations filled the clearing, that cord began to shimmer, as if reacting to an unseen force. With each word Van spoke, the cord seemed to weaken, its dark energy gradually being enveloped by a soft golden glow. The process was excruciatingly slow and intensely personal. Every moment felt like a battle between the remnants of her past and the burgeoning promise of freedom. Zara's emotions surged in tumultuous waves, pain mixed with hope, anger intertwined with longing. The ritual demanded that she confront these feelings head-on, to surrender them to the transformative power of ancient magic. In that charged silence, Aldri's steady hand on her heart was a constant reminder that she was not alone in this struggle. His presence lent her the strength to let go of the paralyzing fear that had defined her for so long. The golden light around the bond grew brighter, pulsating with a newfound energy that resonated with her inner wolf, a symbol of the fierce, untamed spirit that she had long suppressed. It was a visual promise that the pain of the forced bond could be transmuted into something beautiful, a spark of self-determination and hope. As the ritual reached its climax, Van's voice rose in fervent intensity. "Release your fear and embrace the light of your true self," he cried, the words echoing across the clearing like a clarion call. In that moment, the dark cord trembled, and with a final, almost imperceptible surge, it began to unravel, dissolving into the night air like mist under the morning sun. A heavy silence followed, a pause that seemed to stretch into eternity. The only sound was the soft, steady rhythm of Zara's breathing, now tempered with the gentle assurance of release. Though the process had been fraught with risk, the promise of liberation shone through the lingering echoes of magic and emotion. Zara opened her eyes, meeting Aldri's with a newfound clarity, a look that spoke of both relief and the weight of the journey ahead. Van, his task complete, offered a knowing smile, his eyes reflecting the deep satisfaction of a ritual well performed. "The bond is severed," he whispered, his tone both reverent and cautious. "But remember, the path to healing is long and treacherous. This is but one step in your journey to reclaim who you truly are." In that moment, as the mystical energy slowly receded into the night, the clearing bore witness to a transformation both profound and perilous. Zara felt the raw, pent-up energy that had once chained her begin to transmute into a warm, hopeful light, a symbol of the possibility of new beginnings. Though the remnants of her past still lingered like distant shadows, the ritual had ignited within her a powerful belief that she could, at last, step into a future defined not by fear, but by the strength and resilience of her true self. The bittersweet taste of freedom. In the silent aftermath of the ritual, the clearing seemed to hold its breath as if the night itself were witnessing a transformation. Zara stood in the center of the stone circle, feeling an unfamiliar lightness spread through her chest. The oppressive weight of the bond that had once constricted her every thought was now receding, replaced by a delicate, almost imperceptible freedom. Yet, with this newfound release came a tumult of emotions, a heady mix of relief, fear, and bittersweet uncertainty. As the lingering echoes of Van's incantations faded into the rustle of leaves, Zara's mind began to clear. For years, the forced mate bond had been a constant, suffocating presence, a dark shroud that had dictated her every move, haunted her dreams, and reminded her of a past steeped in betrayal. Now, with the ritual's potent energy dissipating into the cool night air, she felt the dark cord that had once chained her pulse with terror unraveling like strands of fog under a rising sun. Her heart, which had thundered with anxiety moments before, now beat with a softer, more measured rhythm. It was as though each pulse carried with it the seeds of renewal. In that fragile space between despair and hope, Zara experienced an emotional catharsis. The raw, pent-up fear that had long defined her existence was slowly giving way to an emerging sensation of liberation. She could almost taste the freedom, a bittersweet flavor mingling the salt of tears with the sweetness of long-forgotten hope. Her senses sharpened. The cool night air that had once seemed a relentless enemy now caressed her skin with gentle whispers of promise. The scent of damp earth and herbs, still vivid in the aftermath of the ritual, spoke of rebirth and renewal. Every sound, the soft murmur of a distant stream, the occasional call of a night bird, seemed to herald a new beginning. Yet, amid these tender sensations, lay an undercurrent of caution, a subtle reminder that the battle was far from over. Zara's inner world was in flux. The oppressive darkness that had haunted her was slowly retreating, replaced by an inner light that pulsed with the promise of possibility. For the first time in years, she felt a stirring deep within her, a spark of the wild, untamed wolf that had been subdued by fear. This spark was gentle yet insistent, urging her to reclaim the parts of herself that had long been silenced. It was as if, with the bond weakened, the door to her true self had been unlocked, allowing fragments of joy, strength, and resilience to seep through. Yet, this liberation was not without its shadows. The memory of Thorn, that relentless specter of cruelty and possession, lingered at the edge of her consciousness like a faint afterimage. The relief was interwoven with a palpable residual fear, a reminder that even as she tasted freedom, the scars of her past remained etched upon her heart. Each beat of her pulse carried both the promise of new beginnings and the weight of old wounds. The battle for her soul was not won in a single moment. It was a slow, arduous journey from which she had only just emerged. In that delicate interlude, Aldri's presence was a constant, reassuring anchor. His steady gaze, still filled with both resolve and tenderness, mirrored the inner transformation that Zara was beginning to understand. He did not speak, yet his silence conveyed a promise that while the ritual had begun to free her, he would remain by her side, a guardian against the remnants of the darkness. His hand, still warm in hers, was a silent vow of protection as she navigated the uncertain terrain of her emerging self. As the night deepened, Zara's thoughts turned inward. She recalled flashes of a time when the world was simpler, a time when the pack's howls and the laughter shared under the stars had woven a tapestry of belonging and love. Those memories, though now tinged with pain, also glowed with the soft light of what might be reclaimed. The ritual had not erased her past, but it had offered her a chance to reframe it, a chance to let the broken pieces of her history become the building blocks of a future defined not by fear, but by strength and authenticity. Her eyes wandered over the remnants of the ritual, a few scattered herbs, the dull gleam of a shattered vial, the lingering aura of mystical energy. Each fragment was a testament to the night's transformative power, a reminder that magic, as old as the world, itself still had the ability to mend what was broken. And yet, within that promise lay the tacit understanding that true freedom required vigilance, that even as the bond began to dissolve, the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, both seen and unseen. In that moment of stillness, Zara made a silent vow. She would no longer be defined by the relentless chase, the memories of forced love and unyielding fear. Instead, she would embrace the light that now touched her heart, however fragile it might be. The bittersweet taste of freedom was a call to action, a promise that she could forge a new path, one where the echoes of her past would no longer dictate her future. As the first light of dawn hinted at the horizon, Zara stepped away from the stone circle with a tentative, yet resolute, determination. The ritual had changed her, offering a glimpse of a future where pain could be transmuted into strength and where every scar could serve as a reminder of survival and hope. The battle, she knew, was far from over, but in that quiet, reflective. Moment, the promise of a new beginning shone through, a beacon of possibility amid the lingering shadows of yesterday. The calm before the storm. In the quiet aftermath of the tumultuous ritual, the world seemed to exhale a collective sigh of relief, offering a fleeting respite from the chaos of the past. Under a sky slowly brightening with the promise of dawn, Zara and Aldri found themselves in a secluded haven, a small, weathered cabin tucked away at the edge of the forest, where the only sounds were the gentle rustling of leaves and the soft murmur of a nearby stream. Here, away from prying eyes and relentless threats, they embraced a moment of tender calm. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was serene, bathed in the soft, amber light of a flickering fireplace. The room exuded a rustic warmth that contrasted sharply with the chill of the night outside. Aldri and Zara settled into a worn but comfortable couch, the silence between them filled with an unspoken understanding. It was a quiet interlude, a fragile pause where the scars of their pasts and the weight of impending danger could momentarily be forgotten. Aldri reached out, his hand brushing lightly against Zara's as if to reaffirm their bond. "I know this peace is temporary," he murmured softly, his eyes reflecting both determination and a deep-seated worry. "But tonight, let's cherish it. Let's remember who we are and what we fought for." His words, spoken with the gentle authority of a leader and the caring tone of a kindred soul, resonated in the stillness of the room. Zara's eyes glistened with a mixture of gratitude and lingering uncertainty. As she gazed into Aldri's steady expression, she recalled the vivid memories of her past, the echoes of laughter under starlit skies, the shared moments of joy with her former pack, and the sense of unity that once defined her. Those memories, though tinged with both warmth and sorrow, served as a beacon of hope. They reminded her that there had been a time when love and belonging were real, untainted by fear. Yet, in the wake of the ritual, she also sensed the weight of her history, a history that still threatened to pull her back into the depths of isolation. Between quiet sips of herbal tea and soft exchanges of glances, their conversation meandered through the landscapes of memory and hope. Aldri spoke of battles fought and lessons learned, his voice low and reflective. "I once believed that strength was measured by how many times you could fight," he confided. "But sometimes, true strength is shown in the quiet moments, when you dare to trust, even when everything around you screams to run." His words, laden with the wisdom of hard-earned experience, struck a chord deep within Zara. She realized that the calm they now shared was not just a pause in the storm. It was a testament to their resilience and their capacity to forge something new from the remnants of old wounds. Outside, the forest whispered secrets to the approaching dawn. The air, though momentarily still, carried an undercurrent of tension, a subtle reminder that the threat they had temporarily escaped was never far away. The flickering light of the fire danced on the walls, casting shifting shadows that seemed to mimic the uncertainty lurking in the corners of their hearts. Every so often, the distant sound of a branch snapping or the rustle of the wind brought a momentary spike of alertness, jolting them back to the reality that their sanctuary was only temporary. Yet, within that delicate balance of peace and foreboding, a new bond was quietly taking root. Aldri's protective presence had not only shielded Zara from the immediate danger, but had also opened a window to a future where she might finally reclaim her true self. In that intimate, shared space, the seeds of trust began to sprout, nurtured by whispered confidences, and the gentle rhythm of two hearts gradually sinking in a dance of hope and determination. As the hours passed, the initial adrenaline of the night's chaos gave way to reflective silence. Zara found herself lost in thought, her mind wandering through the labyrinth of her past and the uncertain promise of what lay ahead. The memories of her once vibrant pack life mingled with the painful echoes of a forced bond, creating a tapestry of emotion that was as intricate as it was raw. Yet, in this quiet interlude, the possibility of a new beginning began to crystallize, a future not defined by endless flight, but by the strength to confront and overcome. Aldri, ever vigilant, watched Zara with an expression that balanced hope with the lingering weight of responsibility. "We may have this calm now," he said gently, "but the storm is gathering on the horizon. We must be ready." His tone carried both reassurance and urgency, a reminder that while the night had granted them a brief sanctuary, the inevitable confrontation with the forces that had tormented them was drawing near. In that moment, as the first pale light of dawn began to filter through the cabin's narrow windows, Zara felt a profound shift within herself. The tender intimacy they shared in the quiet, reflective space had stirred something deep inside, a mix of resolve and vulnerability. She realized that she no longer wished to be defined solely by the terror of her past, but rather by the promise of what she could become alongside Aldri. Their alliance, fragile as it might be, was a beacon in the darkness, a sign that even in the midst of looming danger, there could be hope, healing, and perhaps a chance at true freedom. The calm before. The storm was both a blessing and a precursor to the battles that lay ahead. It was a moment of introspection, a pause in the chaos that allowed them to gather their strength and renew their commitment to one another. And as they sat together, their hands intertwined, the serene imagery of the dawn mingled with the undercurrent of impending conflict, a poignant reminder that while peace was a temporary reprieve, the journey toward liberation was far from over. A plan of defiance. In the cool pre-dawn stillness, with the remnants of the ritual's energy still humming in the air, Aldri and Zara gathered in a small, secluded clearing near the edge of the forest. The clearing, rimmed with ancient oaks, whose gnarled branches whispered age-old secrets, became their makeshift war room, a sanctuary where strategy and raw emotion converged in the quiet moments before the storm. Aldri's voice, low and deliberate, broke the silence. "We cannot allow Thorn's terror to dictate our future any longer," he stated, his eyes burning with resolute determination. His tone carried the weight of countless battles fought and the promise of protection, while his steady gaze conveyed that every step they planned to take was laced with purpose. Zara, still reeling from the emotional catharsis of the ritual, nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the dark horizon. In that moment, she recognized that running had only delayed the inevitable, the day when she would have to confront the demons that had haunted her for so long. They spread out a worn, leather-bound map on a flat stone, the paper soft with age and weathered by the elements. Aldri traced a finger along a route that wound through the forest, bypassing the busy urban sprawl where Thorn's influence could be easily concealed. "Thorn believes you're alone in this fight," Aldri murmured, almost to himself, as he outlined the terrain. "But he underestimates the strength that lies in unity." His words resonated with Zara, igniting a fire of defiance that had long been smothered by fear. Zara's voice, steadying despite the tremors in her heart, joined the conversation. "I've been on the run for too long," she said softly, her eyes meeting his with a blend of vulnerability and fierce resolve. "Every dark corner, every shadow, they remind me of him. But I don't want to be that frightened, broken woman anymore." Her admission was both a confession of past weaknesses and a promise of her own burgeoning strength, a resolve to fight back, not just for survival, but for the chance to reclaim her life. Together, they began to lay out a meticulous plan. Aldri explained, "We set a trap, a lure that forces Thorn into a position where his advantage is neutralized." His voice carried the precision of a seasoned strategist. "We'll use your movement patterns against him. For years, he's been certain of your flight. It's time to change the game." He pointed to a narrow, winding pathway indicated on the map, a route that would lead Thorn into a clearing where they could confront him on equal footing. The stakes were clear. If Thorn discovered their trap too soon, the delicate balance of power would tip irreversibly in his favor. Zara listened intently, absorbing every detail. The plan was not without risk. Every step would be fraught with the danger of discovery and the potential for a brutal clash. Yet, within the strategy lay the promise of liberation. "I'll need to be ready for anything," she said, her voice a mix of defiance and cautious optimism. "Every muscle, every nerve, will have to be tuned to the fight ahead." Her words echoed with the determination of a warrior who was ready to confront the past head-on, despite the lingering terror that still lurked in her memories. Aldri's hand rested reassuringly over hers, a silent vow that she would not face this battle alone. "We prepare together," he affirmed, his tone both tender and resolute. "I will be your shield, and you, Zara, will show him that the darkness that once held you captive can be overcome by the light of our resolve." His promise stirred a sense of unity between them, a bond forged not by fate alone, but by a shared commitment to defy the forces that had tormented them. Their conversation turned to the practicalities of their impending confrontation. "Aldri, describe the layout of the forest, the natural choke points where Thorn's movements would be easily monitored and countered." "We position our best scouts here," he explained, pointing to strategic locations on the map, "so that when Thorn steps into our domain, we'll know exactly where he is." His tone was methodical, every word chosen with care to blend tactical precision with the emotional stakes at hand. Zara contributed her own insights, recalling the instinctive knowledge of her past life with the pack. "I can sense his approach, like a whisper in the wind," she said, her eyes narrowing as she visualized the plan. "I know the feel of fear when he's near, and I'll use that to my advantage." Her voice, though laced with the residual tremors of past trauma, carried an emerging confidence. It was as if she was reclaiming the very instincts that had defined her, transforming them from a source of constant terror into a weapon against her pursuer. The strategy was becoming more than a plan. It was a declaration of defiance against a legacy of suffering. In the quiet interlude, as the first hints of dawn painted the sky with soft strokes of lavender and gold, the weight of their resolve grew palpable. Their dialogue, a tapestry of tactical details interwoven with moments of raw, personal truth, set the stage for the imminent clash. Yet, even as they meticulously mapped out their plan, the underlying tension of the looming threat was ever present. Every plan carried the risk of exposure. Every detail was a potential vulnerability. The balance between hope and peril was delicate. Each step forward was both a victory and a challenge. Aldri's final words before they dispersed to prepare were measured and solemn. "Tonight we reclaim our destiny. Thorn may be relentless, but together we are unstoppable." As they separated to ready themselves for the confrontation that would soon unfold, the clearing was imbued with a sense of determined anticipation. In that moment, the Plan of Defiance was not just a tactical maneuver. It was the embodiment of their shared will to break free from the chains of their past. The stakes were unmistakably high, and the path ahead was fraught with peril. But for Zara and Aldri, the choice was clear. Face the darkness together, or remain forever shackled by fear. The clash of titans, the forest clearing erupted into a violent symphony of sound and movement as Thorn, his eyes wild with madness, burst onto the battleground. Under the cold glare of the pre-dawn sky, the air itself seemed to shudder as Aldri stepped forward, his presence as commanding as ever. In that charged moment, time contracted into a series of rapid, almost surreal snapshots, each one a visceral reminder of the stakes at hand. Thorn lunged with the ferocity of a cornered beast, his claws slashing through the air in a blur of desperate, savage strikes. Aldri met him head-on, his movements a study in both raw power and measured grace. Their fight was a dance of titans, a brutal, unyielding clash where every punch, every parry, was laden with the history of past betrayals and the weight of unspoken grievances. Aldri's arms, sculpted by countless battles, moved with an almost artistic precision. He blocked Thorn's vicious swipe with a forearm, the impact reverberating through his bones, and then countered with a powerful strike aimed at disarming his foe. Every movement was executed with deliberate care, as though he were not just fighting for victory, but for the very soul of the freedom he promised Zara. The ground trembled under the force of their blows, and the sound of clashing strikes filled the clearing like a tempest. Zara stood at the periphery of the conflict, her heart a tumultuous mix of terror and fierce determination. Each time Aldri parried Thorn's assault, she felt the surge of adrenaline ripple through her, igniting a spark of hope even as her stomach churned with anxiety. The sight of her protector locked in a struggle with the man who had once tormented her was both cathartic and excruciating. She watched, wide-eyed, as Aldri twisted and turned, using his environment to his advantage, dodging beneath low-hanging branches and pivoting gracefully on the uneven ground. Every time Thorn's rage surged, his movements wild and uncontrolled, Aldri responded with the calm precision of a seasoned warrior. The choreography of their combat was as brutal as it was beautiful. Thorn's blows were raw and unrefined, driven by a desperate, possessive fury, while Aldri's were deliberate and calculated, each strike a masterful blend of strength and strategy. At one heart-stopping moment, Thorn managed to rake a claw across Aldri's cheek, drawing a thin line of blood that shone like a scarlet promise under the pale light. Aldri's expression tightened in resolve, his eyes flashing with an intensity that spoke of every sacrifice he had made to protect Zara. With a sudden, sweeping motion, he disarmed Thorn of his momentum, sending the enraged beta crashing against a tree with a sound that echoed like a death knell. Between the fierce clashes, there were moments of eerie stillness when the only sound was the labored breathing of the combatants and the distant rustle of wind through the treetops. In those intervals, Zara's emotions swirled tumultuously. A surge of fear gripped her as she recalled the horrors of the past, yet that same fear transformed into a burning determination to see this fight through. She clenched her fists so tightly her nails dug into her palms, each heartbeat pounding, a rhythm of both dread and defiance. The raw power of the duel was a spectacle of both violence and hope, a physical manifestation of her inner struggle to break free from the chains that had once defined her existence. Thorn, driven by a corrosive mix of obsession and rage, launched another assault, his form a blur as he charged forward with unbridled aggression. Aldri met him in mid-stride, their bodies colliding in a whirlwind of force that sent shockwaves through the clearing. Dust and leaves swirled around them like a tempest, obscuring the lines between attacker and defender. In that chaotic dance, every movement was a gamble, every strike a risk. The momentum shifted like the ebb and flow of a dark tide, with neither side yielding for long. Amidst the clash, Aldri's protective aura was palpable, a constant, steady force that resonated deep within Zara. As she watched her guardian, she felt an indomitable surge of loyalty and fierce gratitude. Despite the maelstrom of violence, every calculated maneuver and every resolute look from Aldri reinforced the truth that she was no longer alone in her fight. His presence was a beacon amid the storm of her past, a promise that together they could defy the very darkness that had haunted her for so long. As the battle waged on, the intensity of the confrontation grew, each moment more desperate than the last. Thorn's wild attacks began to falter under the unyielding precision of Aldri's defense. The once uncontrollable fury in Thorn's eyes began to waver, replaced by a dawning realization of his own limitations. It was in that crucial, shifting moment that the tide of the battle began to turn decisively in Aldri's favor. A turning point, laden with the weight of countless sacrifices and the hope of a future free from tyranny. The clash of titans continued, a cacophony of raw power, desperation, and the relentless drive to reclaim what was lost. Zara, standing at the edge of the fray, felt every moment sear itself into her soul. The duel was more than a physical confrontation. It was the embodiment of her own struggle against a past that had long held her captive, and the promise of a future that was finally within reach. The moment of severance. In the heart of the chaos, as dust still swirled around the battered clearing and the echoes of combat slowly faded into a haunting silence, Zara felt a sudden, overwhelming shift within her. It was as if the very fabric of her being trembled on the edge of transformation, poised to shatter the chains that had bound her for so long. In that climactic instant, the forced mate bond, the dark, oppressive tether that had linked her to Thorn, began to unravel. Surge of raw, electrifying energy pulsed through Zara's veins, coursing like wildfire from the pit of her stomach to the very tips of her fingers. The sensation was both excruciating and liberating, a bittersweet conflux of pain and triumph that left her breathless. Her heart, which had pounded with a mixture of fear and defiant resistance during the relentless battle, now beat with a newfound cadence, a rhythm of liberation that reverberated deep within her soul. For a fleeting moment, everything slowed. Zara's vision blurred into a tapestry of swirling colors, intense blacks and radiant golds merging into one another, as if the world itself was dissolving into a liquid state of transformation. In that suspended heartbeat, she became acutely aware of every sensation. The cool, tingling air against her skin, the distant echo of Aldri's reassuring presence, and most poignantly, the shattering release of the bond that had imprisoned her spirit. The dark cord that had once wrapped around her heart, pulsing with the raw, corrosive energy of fear and forced love, began to fray and disintegrate. It was as if an invisible force, fueled by her inner strength and the quiet determination that Aldri's unwavering gaze had ignited, had reached inside her and with a final, decisive tug, severed the malignant tether. The release was immediate and all-encompassing, sending a jolt of ecstasy mixed with a lingering sorrow cascading through her entire being. Zara's body trembled, not from lingering fear but from the profound catharsis of that singular moment. The sensation was akin to stepping out of a long, suffocating tunnel into the blinding light of dawn, a sensation so intense that it brought tears unbidden to her eyes. Each tear carried away a fragment of the old pain, a small piece of the bond that had chained her heart to the darkness of her past. The air around her seemed to pulse with the vibrant energy of renewal, and the oppressive weight of Thorn's hold was lifted, replaced by a lightness that made her feel, for the first time in years, truly free. In that moment of severance, a dramatic shift in power dynamics became palpable. Thorn, who had once exuded a menacing control that had tormented her, now appeared diminished, a shadow of the obsessive force he had been. The dark energy that had clung to him, feeding off the forced bond, began to dissipate, leaving him weakened and disoriented. His eyes, once burning with possessive fury, flickered with confusion and a dawning realization of his own powerlessness. The balance of the battlefield had irrevocably changed, and it was as if the very laws of destiny were rewriting themselves in real time. Zara felt a rush of emotions cascade through her, relief mingled with a poignant sorrow for what had been lost, and an overwhelming sense of triumph tempered by the weight of responsibility. The bond that had once been a symbol of forced fate and deep-rooted pain had been shattered, and with its dissolution came the bittersweet taste of freedom. It was a victory that came at a great personal cost, a liberation that demanded she confront the scars of her past, even as it promised the dawn of a new beginning. In the quiet aftermath of the severance, as the mystical energy gradually faded, from the clearing, Aldri moved to Zara's side. His gaze, filled with both admiration and concern, met hers, as if silently asking, "Are you all right?" There was no need for words. The shared intensity of that unspoken moment said it all. His protective presence was a steady anchor amid the swirling emotions, reminding her that she was no longer alone in her struggle. Together, they stood amidst the remnants of battle, a scene transformed by the extraordinary power of release and renewal. Yet, even as the oppressive bond dissolved, the horizon still held the shadow of impending challenges. The victory was not the end of their journey, but a turning point, a crucial moment that promised the possibility of healing while also hinting at the battles that lay ahead. The air, now filled with a heady mix of liberation and residual tension, served as a reminder that freedom was not absolute. It was a fragile state that required vigilance and strength to maintain. In that climactic moment of severance, Zara experienced the profound truth that sometimes the breaking of chains is not a single, final act, but the beginning of a long, arduous path towards self-reclamation. The bitter taste of freedom was as complex as it was sweet, a delicate balance of triumph and the lingering echoes of pain. And as the first light of dawn began to pierce the night, casting a gentle glow over the transformed clearing, Zara knew that she had taken the first decisive step toward reclaiming her destiny. Aftermath and reflection. As the echoes of battle faded into the stillness of the early morning, the clearing lay in ruins, a testament to the violent clash that had just taken place. The once pristine forest floor was now marred by shattered stones, scattered leaves, and splatters of blood that glistened under the weak light of dawn. The air, heavy with the acrid scent of sweat and iron, still carried remnants of the mystical energy that had just shattered a forced bond. Every detail in the devastated surroundings spoke of loss and transformation. Zara stood amid the wreckage, her breath coming in ragged, uneven gasps as she surveyed the aftermath. The physical toll was evident in every bruise and cut that marked her skin, each one a silent chronicle of the struggle. Her limbs trembled from both exhaustion and the adrenaline that still pulsed through her veins, but a strange calm had begun to settle within her, a fragile peace born from the bittersweet taste of freedom. Around her the quiet was almost eerie. The soft murmur of a nearby stream and the occasional rustle of the wind in the trees provided a gentle counterpoint to the earlier chaos. Yet beneath that calm lay an undercurrent of tension, a reminder that the battle might be over for now. But its scars, both physical and emotional, were far from healed. Aldri, standing close by, bore his own marks of the conflict. His once flawless countenance was now marred by a thin line of blood along his jaw and slight bruising around his eyes, evidence of the fierce combat he had waged to protect her. In the quiet, reflective aftermath, Zara's mind churned with conflicting emotions. Relief washed over her, a profound, almost overwhelming sensation that she had finally escaped the oppressive bond that had haunted her for so long. It was as if the very air around her had been cleansed, allowing her to breathe freely for the first time in years. Yet, that relief was tempered by a deep, aching grief. The memories of the violence, the cruelty of the forced bond, and the raw desperation of the battle all merged into a poignant sorrow that tugged at her heart. Her eyes wandered over the ruined landscape, taking in every shattered piece and every lingering shadow. The devastation was not just physical. It was a mirror reflecting the tumult within her. The remnants of the battle were scattered like broken fragments of her past, each one a reminder of the relentless struggle she had fought against the chains, of fear and pain. But as she looked deeper, she began to see something else amid the destruction. A seed of hope. A subtle promise that out of the ashes of her suffering, a new beginning could arise. Aldri moved silently toward her. His presence, steady and comforting. Without a word, he gently placed his hand on her shoulder, a silent gesture that spoke of shared understanding and support. In his eyes, Zara saw a reflection of her own inner turmoil, a mix of vulnerability, determination, and the dawning realization that true freedom was within reach, yet it came at the cost of profound loss. "I'm sorry you had to endure all this," Aldri whispered softly, his voice resonating with empathy. "But now, you're free to begin again." His words, simple and sincere, hung in the air like a benediction. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Zara allowed herself to believe that the future might hold something more than endless fear and solitude. In the moments that followed, the sound of nature gradually returned, a gentle chorus of birds beginning to sing, the soft rustling of the trees as they swayed in the mild morning breeze. It was as if the world itself was trying to heal, to restore the balance that had been so violently disrupted. Yet the scars of the night remained, both on the land and within Zara's soul. The painful memories of the forced bond, the relentless pursuit, and the brutal clash with Thorn were etched into her being, reminders of a past that could never be entirely forgotten. Despite the lingering tension, there was a palpable shift in Zara's inner world. The heavy shroud of fear had begun to lift, replaced by an emerging clarity that shone through her tear-streaked face. She felt a growing resolve, a commitment to not only survive, but to truly live. In that transformative silence, she recognized that healing was a journey, one that would require courage, time, and the willingness to confront the pain of the past. As the first light of dawn broke through the canopy, casting a soft, golden glow over the ruined clearing, Zara took a deep, steadying breath. The destruction around her, though a stark reminder of the violence she had endured, also symbolized the potential for renewal. Each broken stone and every fallen leaf was a part of the mosaic of her life, a testament to her resilience and the promise of a future unburdened by the ghosts of yesterday. With Aldri's reassuring hand still on her shoulder, Zara stepped forward, her movements tentative but filled with a newfound determination. The battle was far from over. Threats still loomed on the horizon, but in that quiet, reflective moment, she allowed herself to believe that healing was possible. The pain of the past would always be a part of her, but it no longer had to define her future. In the gentle interplay of light and shadow, amid the lingering echoes of destruction, Zara found the courage to face what lay ahead. The aftermath of the battle was both a scar and a stepping stone, a bittersweet reminder of the journey she had endured and the strength she had discovered within herself. And as the dawn matured into a new day, the hope for reconciliation, healing, and true freedom began to bloom, casting its light over the remnants of a once dark and oppressive night. A quiet interlude, in the soft early morning light that filtered through lace curtains, a new day unfolded with a gentle promise of healing. Away from the chaos of battles and the haunting echoes of past torments, Zara and Aldri found themselves in the sanctuary of a modest, warmly lit cottage tucked at the edge of a quiet wood. Here, the relentless tension of recent events slowly gave way to tender moments of everyday intimacy, a haven where the simple rituals of life nurtured the fragile seeds of recovery. At the kitchen table, worn smooth by years of shared meals, Zara sat quietly, a steaming mug of herbal tea cradled in her hands. The aroma of freshly brewed chamomile mingled with the soft scent of baked bread, evoking memories of simpler times. Aldri moved gracefully around the small kitchen, his presence a steady, comforting rhythm amid the subdued clatter of utensils. With gentle care, he prepared breakfast: scrambled eggs lightly seasoned, toasted slices of rustic bread, and a bowl of mixed fruits that glowed in the morning sun. His movements were unhurried and deliberate, each act a silent expression of care. As Aldri set the table, their eyes met briefly, and in that silent exchange, an entire world of understanding passed between them. There was no need for grand declarations. The quiet, steady bond they had forged in the heat of battle now deepened in the simple acts of daily life. Zara allowed herself a small, tentative smile as she watched him, feeling the slow, deliberate healing of her spirit. It was in these moments that the stark contrasts of her past, the endless nights of flight, the brutal clashes, and the lingering darkness, began to recede, replaced by the soft warmth of human connection. Over breakfast, they spoke in hushed tones, sharing quiet reflections on the journey that had led them here. Aldri's voice, low and measured, recounted fragments of his own history, stories of battles fought not just with brute strength, but with the courage to trust and to care. Zara listened intently, each word resonating with a profound empathy that soothed the raw edges of her wounded heart. In turn, she shared memories of her once vibrant life with her pack, a tapestry of laughter, unity, and wild, unbridled freedom. Though these recollections were tinged with sorrow, they also held a bittersweet beauty that reminded her of what she had once known and might one day reclaim. After breakfast, they ventured outside into the gentle embrace of the garden. The air was crisp and carried the soft murmur of a waking world, a chorus of birds greeting the dawn and the rustle of leaves stirred by a mild breeze. Aldri knelt beside a small patch of earth where wildflowers struggled through the remnants of last season's frost. With deliberate care, he began to tend the fragile blooms, his hands moving with a tenderness that mirrored his concern for Zara. As he worked, Zara sat nearby on a stone bench, her eyes following his every gesture. In that peaceful scene, the raw intensity of recent conflicts softened into the quiet rhythms of nature, a reminder that life, in all its complexity, had the power to renew itself. The hours passed slowly, measured not in the urgency of survival, but in the gentle cadence of healing. They shared soft laughter over a simple game of cards, and at times their hands would brush, each contact sparking a subtle reassurance, a silent promise of mutual protection and care. In those moments, the bond between them deepened into something chosen and genuine, built not on obligation or fate, but on the quiet, steadfast decision to stand together despite the lingering shadows of the past. As the afternoon light shifted to a warm golden glow, Zara felt a sense of peace she had not known for years. The domestic calm of the cottage, the simple act of sharing a meal, the gentle, unspoken communication in every glance and touch, it was all a stark contrast to the chaos of the battlefield. Here, she was not a wounded fugitive haunted by relentless pursuit, but a woman rediscovering her worth, her resilience, and the tender possibility of love. Aldri's unwavering presence was a constant reminder that she could trust again, that even the deepest scars could eventually soften under the warmth of genuine care. Yet, even in this interlude of domestic serenity, the underlying tension of the world beyond the cottage lingered like a distant storm cloud. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a shared awareness that the battle for their freedom was far from over. But in that quiet interlude, as they rebuilt the fragile fragments of their lives with each caring gesture and heartfelt smile, there was time to reflect, to heal, and to dream of a future where the nightmares of yesterday would be replaced by the promise of tomorrow. In the soft glow of dusk, as they sat together on the veranda overlooking the vast, quiet expanse of the garden, Zara leaned into Aldri's steady embrace. The gentle murmur of crickets and the soft rustling of the night breeze provided a soothing backdrop to their whispered conversation. "I never thought I could feel this. Safe," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Aldri's eyes, warm and resolute, met hers with a promise. "Safety comes not from hiding, but from the courage to face what lies ahead. Together," he replied. In that moment, the bonds of recent strife and the weight of past traumas seemed to lift, if only for a while. The cottage, with its humble comforts and the quiet strength of shared humanity, became a sanctuary where hope began to blossom anew, a gentle reminder that even in the aftermath of great darkness, the light of healing can find a way to shine through. Confronting the shadows, the tranquility of the cottage had been a balm for Zara's battered soul. But even as the soft twilight deepened, a cold whisper of dread began to stir in the air. News of Thorn's possible return had reached their ears. A murmur carried on the wind, growing louder with each passing hour. It was a reminder that even the most serene moments could never fully mask the lurking threat of the past. The pack, long accustomed to the brutal rhythms of their world, was restless. In hushed conversations around flickering campfires and whispered exchanges beneath starlit skies, the name Thorn resurfaced with a weight that pressed heavily on every heart. Zara and Aldri sat together on the weathered porch of the cottage, the cool night air pressing against them as they absorbed the latest report. A scout had returned from the outer territories with dire news. Thorn had been spotted near the border, his presence a dark omen that he might soon launch a renewed assault. The revelation sent a shiver down Zara's spine, a stark reminder that the nightmare was not entirely vanquished. Aldri's expression hardened as he listened, his eyes darkening with a mix of resolve and the burden of leadership. "We must decide his fate, once and for all," Aldri declared, his voice low and firm. There was no hesitation in his tone. A leader's conviction born from years of facing the merciless realities of their world. His hand rested protectively on Zara's, a silent pledge that she would not have to face this threat alone. The determination in his gaze stirred something deep within her. Though anxiety gnawed at her, there was an unyielding spark of resolve to stand against the shadows of her past. Inside, the pack was already gathering. In a clearing on the outskirts of their territory, familiar figures moved with a sense of urgency. Wolves of every rank, their eyes reflecting both sorrow and steadfast loyalty, assembled around the makeshift council circle. The atmosphere was thick with tension, each member acutely aware that the coming decision would shape the future of their pack. Whispers of strategy and debate intertwined with the low rumble of discontent, all underscored by the palpable fear of what Thorn's return might mean for their fragile peace. Back at the cottage, Zara's thoughts swirled in a mix of apprehension and determination. The recent rituals had granted her a glimpse of freedom, a taste of what life could be without the suffocating presence of a forced bond. Yet, the thought of Thorn, the embodiment of all the pain and control that had once nearly broken her, returned with an almost physical force. His looming threat was not just a specter of the past. It was a living, breathing menace, and his fate remained an open wound in the tapestry of their lives. Aldri rose from the porch, his silhouette imposing against the dim light. "We can no longer run from our duty," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Our pack's future depends on the decisions we make now. Thorn must answer for his transgressions." His words, measured and resolute, resonated deeply within Zara. In his steady gaze, she saw not just a leader, but a partner committed to protecting the bonds they had painstakingly rebuilt. As the night deepened, Zara found herself pacing near the window, watching as the first hints of movement emerged in the distance. A lone figure slipping through the darkness with a deliberate, predatory grace. Her heart hammered in her chest, a mix of terror and determination propelling her forward. This was the moment they had dreaded, the moment when the relentless shadows of her past were poised to confront her once more. Aldri's voice broke through her thoughts, calm yet commanding. "I've sent scouts to monitor the borders. We'll have confirmation soon, and then we meet with the elders." His tone was a blend of reassurance and urgency, a reminder that while the threat was real, they were not without allies. "Tonight, we gather our strength. Tomorrow we decide his fate." Zara exhaled slowly, the tension in her muscles slowly easing even as the apprehension lingered. The dichotomy of her emotions, relief at the prospect of liberation, and the ever-present sting of old wounds, left her feeling both fragile and fiercely determined. The thought of facing Thorn, of finally severing the last vestiges of his oppressive hold, was daunting. Yet the path ahead offered a promise of healing and renewal, a chance to reclaim the life that had been overshadowed by fear for far too long. Inside the pack's assembly, voices rose and fell in a measured cadence as the elders debated. The stakes were high, not only for Zara and Aldri, but for every soul within the pack. The decision was not merely about punishing a transgressor. It was about forging a future free from the cycles of betrayal and oppression that had haunted them for generations. In the quiet moments before the final confrontation, as the pack gathered under the ancient boughs of their gathering circle, Zara felt a profound shift within her, a recognition that she was no longer defined by the terror of the past. The burden of fear, once a constant companion, was now tempered by the resolute determination to reclaim her destiny. Together with Aldri, she was ready to confront the lingering shadows, to stand with her pack, and decide the fate of Thorn once and for all. In the cool, anxious air of that impending dawn, the weight of leadership and the promise of a new beginning merged into a single, powerful force. The confrontation loomed like a storm on the horizon, a tempest that would test the very core of their strength, unity, and hope. And as Zara looked into Aldri's steadfast eyes, she knew that no matter the cost, they would face the coming storm together. The pack's judgment. Beneath a sky heavy with the portent of a new day, the pack gathered in a clearing encircled by ancient trees, their gnarled limbs forming a natural amphitheater for the fateful council meeting. The atmosphere was charged with an almost palpable tension, a blend of raw emotion and the weight of centuries-old traditions that had guided their way of life. In the center of the assembly, under the watchful gaze of elders whose eyes held the wisdom of generations, the fate of Thorn was to be decided. As the pack members took their places, murmurs of discontent and sorrow intermingled with a steely resolve. The air was thick with anticipation, each heartbeat echoing the gravity of the decision that lay ahead. Aldri, standing tall and unwavering, addressed the assembly with a voice that was both firm and compassionate. "Thorn's transgressions have shaken the very foundation of our unity," he declared, his tone resonating deeply among the gathered wolves. "He not only defiled the sacred bond that was meant to unite us in loyalty and love, but also endangered every life in our territory with his relentless pursuit." A hush fell over the crowd as his words sank in. Eyes, glistening with a mixture of anger and grief, turned toward Thorn, who stood with his head bowed, a pitiful, broken figure, in stark contrast to the ferocity he had once displayed. Some pack members fumed with the desire for swift retribution, their voices husky with barely restrained fury, while others, tempered by years of wisdom, urged caution and the possibility of mercy. The conflicting opinions filled the clearing like a storm, each voice adding to the cacophony of pain and tradition. "Punishment without mercy will only breed further discord," an elder, his fur streaked with the marks of many battles, interjected, with a measured tone. "We must decide not merely on retribution, but on a path that will restore balance and heal our wounds." His words, though soft, carried the weight of an unyielding legacy, a legacy that had long taught the pack the importance of unity and the preservation of their sacred bonds. Zara, standing quietly near Aldri's side, felt the full force of the pack's judgment as if it were a physical presence pressing against her chest. Every whispered conversation, every heated exchange of opinions, reminded her of the deep scars left by her own tortured past. In that moment, she was no longer just a fugitive haunted by a forced bond. She was an integral part of a community bound by tradition and the constant struggle for survival. The sight of Thorn, reduced to a shadow of the man he had once been, filled her with a conflicting cocktail of relief, sorrow, and a gnawing sense of regret for the path that had led her here. Aldri's eyes swept across the assembly before he raised his voice once more, commanding the silence with a regal authority that silenced even the most fervent murmurs. "After careful deliberation and in accordance with our ancient laws," he began, his tone imbued with both resolve and compassion, "I declare that Thorn shall be banished from our lands. His actions have severed the trust that once united us, and though our hearts ache with the loss of what might have been, we must protect our future from the darkness he represents." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, a mix of relief and mourning. For some, banishment was a merciful alternative to death. For others, it was a bitter acknowledgement that Thorn's betrayal had irreparably torn the fabric of their collective trust. Aldri continued, "This judgment is not made lightly. It is a testament to our commitment to justice and to the preservation of the sacred bonds that hold us together. Let it serve as both a warning and a promise that we, as a pack, will rise above the betrayal of the past and forge a future defined by honor, unity, and freedom." Zara's internal conflict swirled like a tempest. Part of her longed to see Thorn punished for the cruelty he had inflicted upon her and her soul. Yet another part of her, scarred by the echoes of lost love and broken trust, felt a pang of sorrow for the man he once might have been. In that moment, she saw reflected in the eyes of the elders and the lower-ranked wolves a deep, collective mourning for the shattered possibilities, a mourning for a future that could have been filled with hope rather than darkness. Her heart, already bruised by years of isolation and forced bonds, ached with the bittersweet taste of this judgment. It was a moment of reckoning, not just for Thorn, but for her, for all of them. A moment when the weight of leadership and the legacy of their traditions collided with the raw, personal scars of betrayal. As the decision settled over the clearing, the pack began to disperse slowly, each member lost in their own silent reflection. Aldri approached Zara, his eyes softening with a tender empathy that spoke of shared burdens. "This is our way," he murmured, his voice low and reassuring. "We honor the past, even as we build a future free from its chains." His words, gentle yet firm, offered her a glimpse of the healing that could come with time and unity. In the fading light, as the pack retreated into the shadows of the ancient forest, Zara stood at the center of the clearing, enveloped by a profound sense of loss and the faint glimmer of new hope. The judgment had been pronounced, a final, irrevocable decision that would alter the course of their lives. And as she looked toward Aldri, whose steady gaze promised protection and renewal, Zara knew that the path ahead, though fraught with pain, also held the promise of reconciliation and the healing of deep, long-held wounds. Embracing a new destiny, as the last vestiges of twilight surrendered to the soft glow of a rising sun, the pack gathered in a sacred clearing deep within the ancient forest. Tonight, the atmosphere shimmered with an almost tangible reverence, blend of hope, unity, and the promise of a reborn future. The time had come for Zara to step fully into her new destiny, not merely as a survivor of a tortured past, but as an equal among her kin, and as Aldri's chosen mate. The clearing was transformed into a natural sanctuary, with towering trees forming, a vaulted canopy overhead, and the gentle murmur of a nearby stream adding a subtle harmony to the setting. At the heart of the gathering lay a large stone altar, meticulously arranged with wildflowers, evergreen branches, and crystals that caught the early light, refracting it into a spectrum of soft colors. These symbols of nature and resilience were more than decoration. They were potent emblems of renewal and the enduring spirit of the pack. Aldri, resplendent in his authority and calm strength, stood beside Zara. His eyes, deep and unwavering, shone with pride as he introduced her to the assembled elders and members of the pack. "Today," he began in a voice both powerful and tender, "we celebrate not only the judgment rendered upon our past, but the dawn of a new era, one built on choice, honor, and the freedom to love without force." His words reverberated through the clearing, melding with the quiet hum of nature and the expectant whispers of the gathered wolves. One by one, the elders approached, each carrying a token that symbolized the enduring bond of the pack. An elder with fur streaked by the scars of battle held a carved talisman, an emblem of protection and the courage to face one's inner demons. Another, whose eyes glistened with the wisdom of many winters, pressed a delicate, handcrafted pendant into Zara's hand, its design echoing the intertwined fates of the wolf and the human spirit. These gestures were laden with meaning. They were not merely gifts, but blessings, marking her acceptance into the fold and her rebirth as a chosen member of the community. As the ceremony unfolded, the atmosphere shifted to one of profound transformation. Aldri led Zara to the stone altar, where the ritual of acceptance would be performed. With measured grace, he spoke a solemn oath that resonated with centuries of pack tradition. "By the light of the rising sun and the enduring spirit of our ancestors, I proclaim that you, Zara, are free from the chains of forced bonds. You are reborn into our family as my equal, as my chosen mate, and as a beacon of hope for us all." His voice was both a declaration and a promise, weaving together the threads of past pain and future promise. In that moment, a sacred fire was kindled at the base of the altar, Its flames danced with a mesmerizing energy, their light flickering over the faces of the gathered pack members and casting long, hopeful shadows on the earth. As the fire's warmth enveloped them, Zara felt a profound shift within her, a sensation that transcended physical comfort and touched the very core of her being. The flames symbolized the transformative power of love, of a choice made freely and without coercion, a choice that had brought her here to embrace a destiny defined by unity and mutual respect. The ritual continued with the presentation of water, drawn from a nearby spring said to be blessed by the ancient spirits of the forest. Aldri cupped the cool, clear liquid and gently sprinkled it over Zara's head, a symbolic act of purification and renewal. "May this water wash away the remnants of your past sorrows," he intoned, his words reverberating with both gentleness and authority. "May it nourish the seeds of your new life and remind you that every dawn holds the promise of rebirth." As the droplets fell, Zara closed her eyes, allowing the cool sensation to seep into her skin, carrying away the weight of old grief and instilling within her a nascent strength. Throughout the ceremony, the pack's collective energy was palpable, a sakimo, swirling, vibrant force that radiated from every member present. There was a shared understanding that the past, with all its scars and painful memories, was but a foundation upon which a brighter future could be built. The rituals, the tokens, the sacred fire, and the cleansing water all coalesced into a powerful tableau of rebirth. In that luminous moment, Zara felt the oppressive shadows of her past recede, replaced by the gentle, persistent light of newfound freedom. As the final moments of the ritual drew to a close, Aldri stepped forward, once more, his gaze meeting Zara's with an intensity that spoke of unwavering commitment. "This is our destiny," he whispered softly, the words imbued with the tender certainty of a love chosen freely. "Together, we will face the challenges that lie ahead, and together, we will honor the legacy of our pack with compassion, strength, and an unyielding desire to heal." His voice, though low, carried a promise that resonated deeply within her soul. In the quiet aftermath of the ceremony, as the first rays of the sun bathed the clearing in a warm, golden light, the pack began to disperse. Yet, for Zara and Aldri, time seemed to stand still. Surrounded by the loving embrace of her new family and the enduring symbols of renewal, Zara allowed herself to savor the profound, uplifting truth that she was finally free to choose her own path. The forced chains of her past had been shattered, replaced by the gentle, enduring bond of love, one that was not imposed by fate, but chosen with every beat of her heart. In that serene moment, with the promise of a brighter future shimmering, in every flicker of flame and every drop of sacred water, Zara embraced her new destiny, a destiny where love, choice, and unity reigned supreme, and where the scars of yesterday would give way to the healing light of tomorrow. Epilogue. A future unbound. In the gentle glow of a new dawn, the scars of the past began to soften, revealing a horizon filled with promise. Zara stood at the edge of the clearing, now a place of healing and unity, where the whispers of ancient trees mingled with the hopeful murmur of the pack. Her journey had been long and fraught with darkness, a relentless flight from a life defined by fear and forced bonds. But in this quiet moment, she embraced the truth that she was more than just a survivor. She had become a leader, a beacon of strength, and a symbol of hope for those who had long suffered in silence. The transformation had not been swift. Each step of her arduous journey had been etched with moments of heartache, battles fought both, within and without, and a constant struggle against the ghosts of a painful past. Yet, it was in those very trials that Zara discovered the depth of her resilience. The shadows that had once dominated her existence were gradually replaced by a luminous inner light, an unwavering determination to reclaim her destiny. As she looked back on the years of terror and isolation, she saw not only the pain, but also the seeds of a powerful renewal that had blossomed with every tear shed and every scar earned. Beside her, Aldri, steadfast and true, stood as both a protector and a partner. Their bond, forged in the crucible of battle and tempered by the healing rituals of old, had evolved into something pure and undeniable. No longer were they defined by the forces that had once held them captive. Together, they had chosen a different path, one marked by mutual respect, shared courage, and the belief that love should be a choice freely given, not a curse imposed. In the eyes of the pack, Zara was no longer a fugitive haunted by the past. She was a leader reborn, a symbol of transformation, embodying the strength to overcome and the wisdom to guide. The pack, too, had found solace and unity in this new beginning. Their once fractured voices had merged into a harmonious chorus of celebration, a living testament to the power of compassion and the enduring bond of community. Around the clearing, familiar faces shone with renewed vigor and purpose. Elders nodded in quiet approval, while the younger wolves, full of untamed energy, looked to Zara and Aldri as living examples of what was possible when one dared to break free from the shackles of despair. In their eyes, there was a shared understanding that the future was not something to be feared, but a canvas upon which they could paint a destiny of hope and renewal. As the day unfolded, the clearing transformed into a vibrant tapestry of life. The once muted colors of nature burst forth, with wildflowers reclaiming their space among the ancient trees and birds, singing melodies that echoed the joy of newfound freedom. The air, rich with the scent of pine and earth, carried whispers of promises yet to be fulfilled, a reminder that every ending was simply the beginning of another story. For Zara, this was the moment when her long, winding journey converged with a future unbound by the chains of her past. In the reflective stillness of that dawn, Zara took a deep breath and let the fresh, cool air fill her lungs. Every exhale was a release of old burdens, a silent goodbye to the fears that had once held her captive. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the trials she had endured, for they had carved a path toward a more authentic self, one that was not defined solely by pain, but also by the courage to dream, to lead, and to love unconditionally. Her gaze lifted to the horizon, where the sky stretched infinitely, painted with the soft hues of a rising sun. It was a view that spoke of endless possibilities, a world waiting to be shaped by the choices of those brave enough to forge their own destinies. Zara's heart swelled with a quiet, fierce hope as she contemplated the future. There would undoubtedly be challenges ahead, remnants of old threats that might try to resurface, but the strength she had discovered within herself and in the bond with Aldri would guide her through every storm. In that inspiring moment, the legacy of her journey, marked by pain, resilience, and ultimately transformation, became a beacon for others. The story of Zara was a testament to the power of choice and the capacity for renewal. It was a call to all who had ever felt bound by circumstance to rise, to break free, and to embrace a destiny that was truly their own. As the pack dispersed into the gentle embrace of the forest, and the first golden rays of the sun bathed the clearing in radiant light, Zara turned to Aldri with a soft, confident smile. "This is our beginning," she whispered, her voice steady and imbued with newfound resolve. "A future unbound by fear. A future where every day is a chance to live fully, to lead with love, and to create a legacy of hope." In that final, transcendent moment, as the day broke and the promise of a new era shimmered on the horizon, Zara's journey from fear to freedom was complete, and with that, an open invitation was extended to every heart that longed for renewal, to imagine, to strive, and to believe that a brighter future was not only possible, but already within reach.